When I focus on the little things, the simple things in life, like the trees that are starting to bloom even though it's still winter, like those things, that's what a beautiful balance looks like to me. When I can just really appreciate all the little simple things in life, which isn't always easy, but when you can just appreciate what you have and be grateful for what you have, that's when I feel the most balanced.
I'm Kristin Dovbniak, holistic nutritionist and mama of two, and this is the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast, a podcast about ditching the diet dogma, embracing intuitive eating, real food, and living healthy, happy, and whole. Please note the information and opinions on this podcast are intended for information and inspiration only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Please consult with your healthcare practitioner before making any changes. Now, on to the show. Hey, this is Kristin back for another episode of the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast, and I am so thrilled to have a guest on with me today. I know you're all going to love her and her story. Lex Daddio is a wife to Thomas and a mama to T. She lives in Richmond, Virginia, and loves to explore around her town. She's overcome a binge eating disorder and is passionate about helping others overcome as well. She is a recently certified intuitive eating counselor to help others ditch the diets and find food freedom like she has. Her husband has played a huge role in her healing journey, and now they enjoy cooking together in the kitchen. They make easy, attainable, yet super delicious recipes using real ingredients. They hope to inspire others that anyone can cook and to bring people back to the kitchen and enjoying food around the table with those you love. So I have been following Lex for a few years now on Instagram. She's at Restoring Radiance. For those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of my listeners, you already know who she is. But seeing her transformation has been incredible. I've been so inspired by her story and everything she's talked about. With restoring her radiance, coming from darkness into light. So I'm so excited for you to hear this interview. So hi, Lex. Welcome to the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So just to start, tell my listeners, my few listeners who don't know you, who you are and what you do. Just share about yourself.
Yes, so I'm Lex Daddio, and you kind of covered a lot in the bio, but I am a wife and a new mother to a little 8-month-old, and I live in Richmond, Virginia. We live in a little apartment, and I do basically mostly Instagram, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. I've been doing Instagram now for about 6 years. I started it back when it really wasn't a thing at all. And my account was totally private. So I had no intentions of turning it into what it was or what it is now. But I've really gone from eating disorder to kind of recovery to like a slow recovery to looking back now and then going through intuitive eating to more now where I would consider myself at this point being more of a normal eater, which is really nothing I ever expected to happen. And I can go more into that later. But anyways, yes. So I did just get certified to become an intuitive eating counselor. So I'm super excited. I'll be taking on clients and starting groups soon because I've been in such a dark place in my life, and I know that people deal with the same thing just because of how many people tell me that they have dealt with the same thing or are dealing with the same thing. Yeah. So my goal and part of I feel like my purpose and drive for life is just to help others really overcome that too, or just to at least find freedom or be inspired to know that if I've broken out of that darkness, that they can too.
I love that so much. And I appreciate your openness. Like, especially in my position as well, like coming out on the internet and going, I struggled with this for a long time, and using it to help other people it's really incredible, and it's needed for sure. So I appreciate everything that you share, and it's so exciting that you're going to be able to share even more as an intuitive eating counselor. I'm going through the process myself. I think I told you that.
Yes,
and it's so amazing.
Awesome.
Evelyn is awesome.
Oh my gosh, yes,
well,
I love them.
They're both awesome, but yeah.
They're so great. But yeah, I just feel like, part of me feels like I almost went through what I went through to help others get through it as well.
Yes,
and so I just feel like I wouldn't be doing what I'm supposed to be doing if I didn't share and be so open. And at this point, I'm seriously an open book. So I'm just like, I am happy to share because I just share in hopes that it'll help somebody else.
Yes, I love that. I totally agree. So then can you share more with us about your journey to finding this balance, this place from disordered eating to a place of intuitive eating and normal eating, which I know is such a huge transition, and what restoring radiance means to you?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go through it. I'll try to do like a shortened version, which is always my goal, and then I feel like it ends up being long. But basically, back in I think I always had a unhealthy relationship with food, even growing up. My mom was like super into organic food way before it was cool. And so we had a lot of like the organic versions of a lot of food. And I just like hated that because I felt, whenever I went to a friend's house, I would like literally binge on all of their like candy. Like I would literally, or like sugar or anything. I would come home like literally like sick. Like there was multiple times, I like got sick to my stomach. It was bad. So I didn't realize this at the time. I look back now and see that. But anyway, so that's kind of how I grew up, and I was always bigger than my friends. So I wasn't like some little skinny mini. So I was kind of insecure, and I was pretty quiet actually. But anyway, so then I went off to college, and I was like, oh wow, like I'm going to be my own woman now. And like, I'm going to be skinnier and prettier and whatever. And I'm going to get healthy and whatever that means. And I started diving deep into all these cookbooks and nutrition books. And I just like lived and breathed cookbooks, nutrition, everything. I became obsessed to the point of where I think I probably had orthorexia, which I didn't, or I did definitely. I just didn't, it wasn't a term then when you're just over obsessed with eating healthy or being healthy. Which actually led me to be super unhealthy because, I skipped hangouts with friends just to stay home because I was scared to eat any food out and about. I was scared to be around food. I was scared of alcohol, although I did drink it because I was in college and whatever. But I was miserable. I lost my period. I felt terrible. I actually went vegan for a little while and I became super anemic. And so all that being said, I tried to eat perfectly healthy. Now, during this time is when my binge eating really started. I think it had started kind of more in high school, and I didn't even recognize it as much. But this is when I started recognizing it, and I was having binging episodes, and they were getting very severe, where I would drive through multiple fast food chains, and I would get fries and milkshakes and not even burgers, chicken tenders, whatever. I would eat whole pizzas and jars of nut butters, and if you can imagine how uncomfortable it is to eat a jar of peanut butter, it is horrifying. And all this stuff, just anything I could get my hands on, just shoving it in my mouth. And I think for more than one reason, I think part of it was emotional because my life at that time, I was in a really unhealthy relationship. I had a lot of complicated family stuff going on, and I felt out of control. My life felt out of control, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So part of it, I think, was stuffing down my feelings with the food, and nothing could satisfy me. No matter how much I ate or what I ate, nothing would satisfy. I think that was part of the emotional part. And then also I was restricting so much. I was restricting my calories, and I was trying to exercise a lot. And I realize now I was starving. My body was starving, and it was just trying to tell me that. And I just thought oh, you have no willpower. You're not self-disciplined enough. You're not good enough, whatever. And I look back now, my body was just trying to tell me hello, feed me. I am so hungry.
Yeah.
And it was telling me that with my hair, getting really thin and falling out, brittle nails, dry skin, no period. I just I was falling apart. And anyways, so all that being said, so I went through a binge eating disorder for years and years and years. And there was times when it got better, and then times when it got worse and whatever. And then finally I actually ended up graduating college. And I moved home, and I actually ended up going to Spain for 2 months. And this is actually something I just discovered. I realized was maybe more of an aha moment than I thought. I went to Spain for 2 months by myself to study Spanish, and really I was just running away from my life because I was just like, I got to get out of here. And I thought that I would heal things. But turns out I was still binging in Europe and in Spain by myself and just thinking to myself, like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm still me. I'm still struggling. And anyway, I just remember that's actually really when I got into studying the Bible and the Word and all of that. And that was huge for me. But that was a big part of my healing journey, definitely. But anyways, probably mostly the main part. But anyway, so I just remembered I was just like, I can't do this anymore. This can't be like this. And Thomas and I, who is my now husband, I've known him since I was 7, but we had kind of just started talking like right before I went to Spain, which was kind of funny because it was like finally the first time in my life, like I didn't have a boyfriend and I was like okay with it. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to be me. And it was like the day before I left and he was like, hey. And I'm like, what? Now? Like I had loved him my whole life. And then all of a sudden he wants to do this before, like start talking. So anyway, went to Spain. And then when I came back, Thomas and I had started dating, and honestly being around him and watching the way he ate, he was such a normal, well-rounded eater. And I was just like, how can he eat all of these foods and it be okay? Because this was like a time in my life where I felt like dairy, gluten, soy, alcohol, sugar, all those things were the enemy. And so I was just like, how does one eat all those things? But so anyway, that was like mind blowing to me. And actually having normal eaters around me, people that like really ate normally too, really helped a lot. Yeah. That like, cause it just reminded me like, oh, this, like you can be normal around food. I had only surrounded myself with people that weren't normal around food. So none of us knew what normal was. And I think there can be a normalcy around food, but anyway, so then I kind of dove deep into like the intuitive eating thing. And I think I had come across a book from the Real Life RD, but I didn't really like one day be like, I'm going to become an intuitive eater. Like it wasn't that. I think my journey was really slow, and looking back, I can see it. But in the time, I honestly don't think I recognized it. Like the more I pursued like being around people that were normal eaters and like actually being in community and not focusing on food, like the more my binges spread out, the more I actually also fed myself food and allowed myself to eat, the binges spread out because I was not restricting anymore. I was actually eating. My body was like starting to feel good again. And I was dealing with so many stomach aches, all this stuff. Anyway, so see, I told you it can get really long.
That's okay. I love listening.
Okay, good. So anyway, so then the more I just like started pursuing those things over than pursuing whatever health is, was really when they started, and truly nourishing myself with like actual food was huge. Whatever that food was, like that made a huge difference. But really my binges started spreading out until eventually, to be completely honest, they just were gone. And I kind of like forgot, like, I think I like looked back one day and I was just like, I haven't binged in like 8 months. And it was like, whoa, like, so cool. Oh my gosh. Like I didn't even realize what was happening, but there was such like a renewal of my mind. And like, I had to like really recondition, like I had to renew my mind to allow these foods to be okay. And that took a long time, and it actually took a lot of effort, I guess, because I really had to be intentional about being like, no, this food is okay. And then like really reconditioning my body, because I had such a mind-body connection of like, bread is terrible, I'm going to feel awful, and I can't eat it. And so my stomach would hurt because my stomach's like, bread feels terrible and it's awful and you're going to feel terrible. And it was like, oh my gosh, now I thrive off bread, if you can't tell from my Instagram. But which is funny to me because like it used to be such a fear food to me, and peanut butter too, which it's kind of makes me laugh because I eat it so often, and that used to be like such a struggle for me. So it's like the foods that were my biggest fear foods are now like foods that I've incorporated in my life like on a daily basis. So I kind of so if that all makes sense, I think I moved more into the intuitive eating thing and started really learning that like I had to let go of these foods, and really just like I couldn't heal my body, because I do believe in like gentle nutrition and all that stuff, but I did realize that you cannot heal your body using nutrition until you heal your relationship with food.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's huge for me to understand, because I couldn't figure out where the line was of allowing yourself to eat whatever the heck you want, you know, whatever, or like taking care of yourself. I had a really hard time figuring out that boundary for a long time. And then I realized I had finally gotten to the point where I could actually incorporate gentle nutrition. And that is what changed so much for me too, to now I think where I'm at the point where I feel like I'm a normal eater. Does that make sense? All of that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Your story is so awesome. And it's really funny. We have a couple parallels in our stories too, where I struggled with mostly restriction, but also with binge eating sort of towards the end of college. And I went away and studied abroad in Italy for a couple months. And
oh my gosh.
yeah, and I was in sort of the early stages, and I already shared this in one of my earlier podcast episodes, but I was already in what I thought I was like fully recovered, and I was good and I was great. But I now realize that I was in like the early stages of recovery. But it was also sort of a period of time for me where I was removed from the rest of my life, and I was like, oh, okay, so I'm eating a little bit more normally in quotations, but my problems are still here, my insecurities are still here, and that was something that I had to work through. So I loved hearing that, because I didn't know that part of your story. And then after I met my husband, and when we started dating, he is also a very normal eater, and that's definitely something I want to chat with you about a little bit later. But it's so incredible to surround yourself with people who are normal eaters, because just like you, I didn't actually think it was possible to just be normal around food and not be thinking about foods being good or foods being bad. And it's so incredible to be around those people and realize that this is possible. And I think one of the things that you emphasized that I really loved was that you had to allow yourself to actually eat and eat all foods in order to stop binging. Because I think that so many women who struggle with binge eating, whether it's, disordered, or, I mean, it's always disordered, but whether it's an actual eating disorder or it's just something that they struggle with from time to time, it's often because we're restricting ourselves during the day, and we're putting these rules and regulations around food and this fear, like you were saying, those fear foods you had. And that's what tends to result in this binge eating. Whereas I think so many women, as women come to me and women I hear about, will say, oh, I'm so bad for binging, or they beat themselves up over it. But really, their efforts to be quote unquote healthy oftentimes backfire into this binging. And I think so many women, and I think this is why so many women come to you and tell me that they can resonate with your story, because it's so true. And I think it's unfortunately all too common that women experience that. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And it's so incredible to hear your journey from struggling so much to really finding that place of not just intuitive eating, but normal eating.
Yes, and actually it is funny that our stories do parallel with Italy and Spain. Did you notice, and now I think about it more, and I've been thinking about this more often, is I didn't have access to the products and like special certain things like that I would have here, like, almond flour, stuff like that. Like it was harder to come. Oh, actually, almond flour wasn't really huge then, but it was harder to come by that stuff. Like I could barely find peanut butter anywhere. It was like I had to get like one. So I mean, they were already I was surrounded by such normal eaters to begin with, where like you would drink coffee with just cream or whatever, or a cappuccino, like you wouldn't think different. Or, you would just eat that pastry that like it wasn't a bad food to them. It was like beautiful to them. And so that actually changed my perspective a lot. And I always tell Thomas I want to bring a European atmosphere into our home.
Yeah, no, it's true, because they are calm around food, because it isn't a thing to them.
No.
it's a thing in that it's part of their culture and part of their family experience, and they love it and they enjoy it. And I think, I mean, this obviously isn't true for every single European, but I think as a general culture, they have a healthier relationship with food than we do. And it's funny you're talking about like the coffee with cream or a cappuccino, because that was actually one of the really challenging things for me when I first got to Italy. We were sort of, so I went with one of my best friends from high school, and she was actually the friend who kind of sat me down and told me that I was struggling and I really needed to get help a few months prior. And we were like, so what do you do for breakfast? And we hadn't gone to the market. It was like our first couple of days there. And they were like, oh, you just grab a cappuccino and a croissant. And we're like, what? And I was in nutrition school at the time, and it was like, well, that's what you do. Yeah. And so that next morning, I remember the feeling of like, okay, Kristin, it's okay. You're going to go and you're going to have a cappuccino and a croissant, and it's going to be good, and you're going to be fine. Like, I had to talk to myself about it because I had these ideas in my head around like this, this isn't a quote unquote healthy breakfast. This isn't a quote unquote balanced breakfast, right?
Right. You're like, okay, where's the nutrition in this?
Right. But it was such a beautiful experience, and they all sat outside. So a bunch of the people, I lived in this little town, and a bunch of the people in the little town just sat outside these little like bistro chairs and sat, and they sipped their cappuccinos and ate their croissants slowly and chatted and had this beautiful morning before they went off to work or, whatever they were doing. And it was such a beautiful experience to be surrounded by that sort of culture. So,
yes, I love it so much.
I love that.
That's so cool.
So for those of my listeners who might be in the thick of things with their disordered eating, struggles with letting go of binging or dieting for that matter, what do you feel like was the hardest part of your recovery? What sort of wisdom can you give from that?
I think there is, it's all so hard.
Yes.
But I think there's a lot of hard parts. But one thing I think that was really frustrating for me was like when I would go so long without a binge, and then all of a sudden I would binge again, and I would feel so frustrated.
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, I just went like 2 weeks, which was like a long time for me in between, or even 3 weeks. And then it was like, I'd binge again, and I would feel so defeated and so guilty and so shameful. And I was so upset. And I think I didn't realize that, the smallest victories, I didn't look at the like, oh my gosh, I went 3 weeks without a binge. It was more of like, I binged, and it was like, I didn't realize that every little victory was really a part of the big victory, I would say.
Yeah.
Like I think you just got to change your perspective, which is incredibly difficult when you're in it. I understand that. Looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, right. If I had looked at it more of being like, oh my gosh, I did 3 weeks. Okay. Whatever. But it's funny because the binging would always happen again. It would be triggered again when I started doing some kind of restriction, like, I'm going to juice cleanse this week because whatever. I did a lot of those. And, so then I would just, it was pretty much didn't end up counting because then I would just binge on everything I didn't eat for like those 3 days and make up for it. So yeah, I think I would just want to encourage people that even if if they're becoming less, or even if you're still in the thick of it, you just have to remember that like every little victory in it is really a part of the whole story.
Yes.
And part of the recovery. If that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah, it's a process. It really is a process. And you really do have to embrace all of those little victories. I love how you put it. Yeah.
Yes.
So can you remember a moment then, maybe a time, maybe a day, when you realized that you were free? Like you were free from the restriction, from the binging. I know you sort of mentioned that you realized that there was, it's been so long since I binged. Do you have a moment that you can think of?
The funny thing is I think my husband noticed it before I did. I remember one time, I don't remember exactly. It might have actually been either right before I was pregnant or while I was pregnant. Pregnancy changed a lot for me too, actually. I think I became way more of an intuitive normal eater then. But I will say that I remember he looked at me one day and he was just like, you're not in chains anymore. He was like, you don't have a problem with food anymore. And I was like, you're right. I was like, oh my gosh, like, look at me eating like sourdough for breakfast and then still eating a burger for dinner and like not being scared of that. Like I used to like be like, you know, like 1 carb in a day. If I had a slice of bread, I was over. It was it. That's all I could have. And, you know, and I was just thinking, and I used to not eat wheat or anything like that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like you're really right. Like I use, and like people do have allergies, and I always like to say that because I don't mean it against anybody if they're like, okay, well, I'm allergic to dairy and I can't have it. Like, okay, well, that's different. I do understand that. But I did have a point where I thought I was allergic to, I thought I was gluten intolerant, dairy intolerant, like allergic to alcohol. I thought everything. But it was really, for me, it was really more of the fear around those foods than it was the actual food. And once I really let those go, and sometimes I still have to be like, okay, this is okay. Like I don't have to like compensate for it or whatever. You know, sometimes like that's another thing to encourage people. Even if you're healed and recovered, like sometimes these thoughts still come in your head and you just have to recognize them and cut them off.
Yes. Yeah.
And so like, even if you know, you're always in process. We never fully arrive at anything, you know, that's part of life. And that's like a beautiful thing. 'Cause we're never going to be perfect. But anyway, I think it was really just when my husband had told me that, and I was like, oh my gosh, you are so right. Like I feel so normal around food. Like I feel like I love food again. Like I'm excited about it, where I used to be so scared that anybody even thought I liked to eat. Which is sad.
Yeah.
Now I'm super passionate.
No, I'm smiling because I totally understand that experience. And what a special moment for you and your husband to kind of recognize that together, because I know that he has walked through a lot of this with you.
Yes.
And for him to realize that you have found this freedom in food and this normalcy in food, which is so cool. So, you know what? I kind of want to go into this now, and I was going to ask you a little bit later, but I asked you if I could add this in because I listened to the live you did with Thomas, your husband, a couple weeks ago, and I was so blown away by how supportive he is of you, and not just you, but your mission to share your journey to food freedom with other women. He had some amazing words of wisdom. So how has he helped you and been supportive of your journey to finding balance?
Oh, he is my number one encouragement. He is not my healer, or he can't be the one to save me. So I always like to tell people that, because you can't put that on somebody to save you, because it's not about them. But he has just been so encouraging in this whole process. And I told him, I actually am often asked this question. I actually told him about my eating disorder like on our second date, because I just wanted to be so open, and I wanted him to like understand that I had a hard time around food, because like our first dates were like all out to eat. And that was really hard for me actually to get used to. But he has just been, you know, he's been so encouraging in that he's kind of two ways. So he's very forward and almost blunt, I guess I would say, like, whereas like he doesn't understand the compassion side of that kind of thing. It's kind of like, well, just eat this because, I mean, like, it's not bad for you. Just eat it. Why wouldn't you just eat it? And I'm like, you don't get it. And that's okay. But he's really learned so much more, and he's kind of just seen, I think he's seen me transform in so many ways. And he just encouraged me so much with just the way he eats. And he has like a very compassionate side. Like he really just, he feels for, like he felt for me, and he like feels for these other girls like that, you know, are struggling with this kind of thing. And he just so believes it doesn't have to be that way, which that has always been a huge inspiration to me, where he's like, it doesn't have to be that. Like, why can't we just eat normal? And I'm like, okay, yes, but it's more complicated than that. But is it really? Maybe it's not as complicated as we think it is. And maybe we can just all eat normal and let go of those things. Maybe anybody can. And so that's been like a huge encouragement to me. And he just is like so full throttle, believes like you do not have, like we have conversations like this all the time, just being like, I don't want people to live this way. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. I want people to be free. Like most of our dinner conversations are about this, or about like sitting at the dinner table, like drinking a glass of wine and like having just made a beautiful meal that uses butter or cheese or whatever, but we love but we always have like yummy, like hopefully seasonal produce. It's not always seasonal, whatever. We do what we can, but we've changed our food. I've changed my food perspective from health and wellness, quotation marks, or to like enjoyment. So like actual, like this food is good for our soul. Like we created this beautiful meal and like, let's enjoy it rather than thinking of all the other things. So anyway, so he's just been a huge encouragement. And he's like really passionate about it too, which is really sweet because it really it keeps my fire going.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. What an incredible part of your healing journey he is. Yes, that is so cool.
Yes.
So I think this sort of piggybacks onto that, onto what you were just sharing about kind of changing from that health and wellness perspective to that eating all food and enjoying your meals and feeding your soul. So I know that you are also passionate, as am I, about choosing real food for the most part, of course, right? So that gentle nutrition aspect of things. So how have you found that balance of cooking with mostly real foods and enjoying real foods? And I'm putting real foods in quotation because I believe all food is real food, but we're talking whole food items. Yeah. So how do you avoid it becoming restrictive again?
Yeah, definitely. I think just having all the things around actually really helps me. Yeah. Like my goal as a mom and a wife, I told Thomas that like I want to be the mom that always has a batch of like freshly baked goods around, because I want T to know that it's not scary. Like chocolate chip cookies don't have to be scary. Like I baked them with love for you guys and for us to enjoy. So I don't want sugar to be demonized as a bad thing. And so I think like having those things around and having the things that you really enjoy around, like I used to be really scared to have ice cream around because I would binge on the whole pint. But now, I mean, I will tell you, I have 2 pints of Ben & Jerry's in my freezer, and like I had them 2 nights in a row and I was like, oh my gosh, they're so good. And then like I haven't had them in like 2 weeks because I'm like, or maybe a week, whatever. But I'm like, I don't really like, I'm kind of over it. So I think but then like I find that I naturally will crave the more you really learn to like listen to your body and like let yourself have these foods and to eat what you actually enjoy. Like, okay, well maybe I will crave some like scrambled eggs with, spinach and like usually cheese and like some nice sourdough or something the day after I have ice cream, because my body's craving savory and nutrition over like getting a croissant for breakfast that day or having a cinnamon bun. I don't know, just anything. Like my body doesn't tend to crave that again. And so I don't know if that's super helpful, but I feel like
no, it is definitely.
I feel like it's become such an intuitive aspect of my life to really choose sometimes I choose foods that are more play foods because they sound fun and exciting, and Thomas and I are like, let's go get ice cream, that sounds great. And then sometimes it's I don't really want to go get ice cream tonight. I don't really feel like I'm still kind of full from dinner, and I don't really we actually had this conversation the other night. We were going to go actually pick up some local cake from a bakery close by and that we've been wanting to try. And we both ate a really yummy dinner. And then we were like, I'm pretty full. Like I'm not in the mood for cake anymore. Let's save it for another night when we really want it. Yeah. So it was kind of, and I didn't feel like, but I had a lot of it that I was going to have cake tonight. Like, I didn't have where I used to be. And then if I didn't have it, I'd be really upset and be like, oh my gosh, well, I didn't have the cake. I have to have something else. I would be really like disappointed because that was my one opportunity to have that cake or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah. Does that answer?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think that's such a good point too. It is part of that allowing all foods and knowing that that special food is going to be there another day, that you don't need to only eat the special foods in one day. You don't need to have like a treat day or a treat meal or whatever. They can be a part of your life. And I love the idea of just having all those foods around and being exposed to all of those foods. And I love that you are exposing tea to all those foods too.
Yes, so fun.
Excuse me, sorry. Sorry, I'm just going to pause for a second. So I love that you're exposing tea to all those different types of foods too. And from following you on Instagram, I think you're already that mom who always has, a baked good around. I love your recipes. We've actually made some of your recipes in our house. And I love that balance you have of enjoying those treats, enjoying those baked goods, but also eating those real foods, and that you recognize that all you have to do is listen to what your body wants. And that if we listen to what our body wants, our body will respond. We might have Ben and Jerry's for dessert one night, and the next morning we might want something different than that. We probably won't want Ben and Jerry's for breakfast. Maybe we will. I don't know. But your body does naturally start to self-regulate and find that balance when we do just allow ourselves to have all of those foods around and not have it be a thing and just have them be a part of your life.
And it takes time, for sure.
It does, yes, definitely. It's not just an overnight type of thing where you're like, I'm not going to, this isn't going to be a thing. I'm just going to eat ice cream and kale, and it's just going to balance itself out. It does take time. It is a process, yeah. Yes. So actually, piggybacking on that as well, I love your excitement whenever you share about going out to eat and choosing a place with your husband and enjoying every moment in that. So what are your tips for getting to the point of, we've already kind of talked about enjoying all foods, but what is your approach when you go out to eat now? So for the women who are nervous about going out to eat and they're on this intuitive eating process, or they're thinking about going through this intuitive eating process and they're like, well, I want to nourish my body, but I'm afraid to go out to eat.
Right. Okay. Makes me laugh that you notice how excited I get, because I get really excited. I get super passionate about trying somewhere new or going somewhere that we love. And I get all excited. Thomas is like, oh my gosh.
I do too. So I feel it.
Yeah, it's so fun. And okay. So I would say when I used to get really overwhelmed by a menu, because I would be like, okay, this is my one opportunity to eat out. This is my one opportunity to eat at this place. And so one thing I like to try to do, because we eat pretty well rounded at home. We eat a lot of vegetables and all that stuff. And so when it comes to eating out, I always like to try something that I don't make at home, or that's not as easy to make at home. Because if you get I used to go to a restaurant and order like everything that I would always make at home and be disappointed, because I'm like, well, I could probably make that better myself at home. Mm-hmm. Or even like, okay, I eat that all the time. But there are things that you like, and like it's okay to like order, kind of like based on the kind of food you like. But I think just approaching the menu with be calm, because it can feel really overwhelming. And I think also like survey the whole menu first before you're like freaking out about everything. But also just know that one meal out isn't going to ruin everything. Isn't going to ruin like, yes. It's okay if they cook with a little more oil or fat or salt or whatever. Like you're not going to die. It's actually like, it's a good balance, I think, to have in your life. Now, I will say, if we eat out really often, we're both like, ugh, like I'm kind of sick of eating out. Let's make some good food at home. Like we're, like we feel it. We're like, okay, we've probably eaten out too much. Let's definitely make some good, simple food at home. So it balances it out. So just know that if you're going to eat out, it's okay. And it's okay to eat out, and you can balance it out with more simpler things at home if you feel the need. But I think it's important to really enjoy your time while you're there, and enjoy like I'm all about the whole 9 yards. So I love like the atmosphere. I mean, we love to try like the drinks or the specials or some appetizers, and I always just like try to not go super like starving, because I know that I'll like way overeat because I'm just like too hungry and like ravenous. Mm-hmm. And so I do like to like enjoy, like we always get like appetizers and an entree and like usually a dessert. So I know to pace myself, and we don't actually let them take anything off the table unless it's done, because if we want to go back and have a little more of something, we will, depending on how much came out. So I think pacing yourself is really important too, which is also just good, because that's part of enjoying it, is being
absolutely.
It being about the conversation, and obviously it looks a little different now with a baby. Yeah, that would be my advice.
But it is about the experience. So, such great advice. I love all of those tips. I think those going to be really, really valuable. And I love eating out too. So, it has been a shift for me too in eating out and enjoying the whole experience, and not going there ravenous and eating all of the things and then feeling like physically sick because I'm like, oh, I can only eat this once. So I loved all those tips you gave. Right. Yeah. So you mentioned going out to eat with the babies a little bit different. And you do have a sweet little 8-month-old T. I love watching your journey with baby-led weaning and feeding him. It's so fun. So how has your relationship with food changed since becoming a mama? So either during pregnancy or in kind of that postpartum period?
Yeah. So I think in pregnancy, it was just different because I had never, I had finally allowed myself to eat, but I had never felt that kind of hunger before, where like I would wake up at like 4 a.m. and I was like starving, and I was like, what is happening? Like I hadn't crossed that boundary where I was like, okay, you can really eat any time of day. It was like, whoa, I'm not comfortable eating at 4 a.m. This is weird. But I did. And so I had to like break out of a lot of boundaries I didn't know I still had. Or like if I was still hungry after dinner and like I wanted like a pretty substantial snack or something, like a couple hours later, like it was like I would eat that. And so I think it just kind of, it was not less about me and more about T. And that just kind of changed my perspective in that timing. And then also, I mean, like literally my first trimester, like hello carbs, and I hated eggs. I hated eggs actually my whole pregnancy almost, which is funny. And all of a sudden T doesn't like eggs. So I'm like, what the heck is this thing with eggs? But anyways, so then I just had to like really listen to like what the heck I wanted. And all I wanted was just like fresh fruit. I was like which is funny because I was pregnant a lot, like in actually the winter. But so I was like craving more like pizza and pasta and stuff like that then. And you know what? I had so much fun with it. Like I had so much fun with like actually eating. Like I think I became way more of an intuitive eater then because I was like listening to like, oh my gosh, that sounds so good. And I would eat it and it was so good and I loved it. And just kind of like moved on where, other times it was like, I wouldn't be like that. I don't know if all that makes sense, but anyway, so I ate a lot of carbs to start because like you're tired and you need energy and your body is telling you exactly what it needs. So I just like went with it, and it was like I felt good. I felt really good in pregnancy, which was crazy to me because I always thought I was going to be that girl that didn't feel good. But yeah, so it was a beautiful thing. And then postpartum, so talk about hunger and pregnancy. It was like a little more than I expected. But it wasn't like I wasn't like crazy ravenous or anything. Now, when I had T and I started breastfeeding, I have never felt that hunger in my life.
I know, it's like crazy.
A 12-year-old boy, like going through. I was like that. He's like playing sports and like just eats all day. I was like, I could not fill my stomach. I was just starving all the time. I would wake up at like 6 a.m. I'd be like up all night, but like get up at like 6 a.m. and I'd be like, I'm starving. Like I need like a spread. Like I was having like, we froze a bunch of pancakes and like, I was like, I needed like pancakes and eggs and all. I would eat like 8 meals a day and I was like ravenous. And finally now that has like calmed down a little bit, and I'm still hungry a lot. But anyway, so that has like changed my perspective a lot because it's just really not about you. And I have noticed on days I don't eat as much, my milk does not come in as heavy or as much. And so there's been times where my supply has been low and I've had to just like cut off exercise. I'll just walk only. And so I've had to like cut off any kind of like weights or anything like that and eat more. And my supply goes right back up every time. It blows my mind. And so, but it's actually been really cool because then I've like linked it so much. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just like, I haven't been eating enough. I've just been doing a lot of things and I just haven't paid attention, whatever. And so it's just changed my relationship with food just because I'm nourishing myself for more reasons than just me.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
Cool.
It really does change your perspective when you're nourishing another human, for sure.
Yes.
And I can definitely relate to the crazy nursing hunger after baby was born
It
because
was
I had a similar
crazy. No one
experience
told
where
me about that.
yeah, no, me either. I know it's crazy, but your body is using that fuel to create food for your baby. It's pretty incredible when you think about that. So it makes sense. But yeah, no one tells you how hungry you are.
Yeah, I heard you're like hungry in pregnancy, and like I was hungrier for sure, but I had no idea what I was up against when it came to actually having the baby.
And I think it's a good encouragement for women too who might be in that period because I do speak to mostly moms. That's kind of where my business and where my podcast is geared towards moms, and so especially first time moms who haven't experienced this and who are like, oh no, I'm like super hungry postpartum. Aren't I supposed to be like losing the baby weight? And they're all worried about, eating more. But it really is about taking that perspective of I am nourishing another human being, whatever you choose, because not everyone chooses to nurse, but it's normal. Our hormones change postpartum. And there are going to be those changes because your body was during the pregnancy period and oftentimes afterward nourishing another human. So I think sometimes taking that step back and going, okay, it's okay to eat more. It's okay to listen to my body. My body knows there's nothing wrong with feeling extra hungry, just honoring that and eating more. And I love that you also like made it exciting. You're like, all right, I'm more hungry, so let's enjoy more foods and different types of food.
To be honest, I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much more like capacity for meals during the day. This is fun. Like, let's get to it.
Yes. And that's such a great balanced mindset. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it is fun.
So my last big question for you is how do you balance self-care and being a work from home mama? So what is like a day in the life of Lex look like, and how do you balance all that?
Which so I'm going to say question. Oh, it's okay. I'll answer the best I can. I'm going to say it is a very time consuming to be a mother, and it is a 24/7 job, and it is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. And I am so thankful, and I really feel so blessed that I'm able to be a mom because I know not everybody can. So having that perspective always changes everything for me when I focus on being thankful rather than thinking about the things that I don't have. But I will say, so balancing self-care can be a little difficult. But it's super important. Sometimes having someone watch T if I can is really just important for my mindset, my life, my everything, because, you have to also still be you, even though you're, have a kid, you're not just a mom now. It's not your identity, you're still you. And so I think like sometimes if my husband will like let me, I'll be like, I need like 30 minutes. And he's like, I got you. And, like if your husband comes home and you need 30 minutes, like go out on a walk, go get in the bathtub, like go hide, I don't know, do something, like a face mask. Like I actually have this thing now that T sleeps really well through the night and stuff. I actually like to get up like a good 2 hours before him, as long as I'm still getting 8 hours of sleep. I'm like, I need 8 hours of sleep now that I can have it. I'm like, please, let me have that. I try to get up a couple hours before him so that I can have that time to just be me. And I like to journal and like drink my coffee and relax. Sometimes I'll go work out or something and have that time to myself, or I'll just like spend time just doing that, getting some work done. Just that like is self-care to me now. And that's what fuels me to make me a better mom while he's awake and while I'm home. And being a work from home mama, like I try to get most of my work done in the morning like that or during naps so that I'm not on my phone all day or I'm not on my computer. It's really, really hard. I'm going to tell you that. I'm not great at the boundaries and I'm working more and more on it. But the thing that motivates me is that T wants our phones so bad. Like whenever our phone's around, he just wants our phone. And I'm like, he wants my phone because I'm on it. And he wants it because I'm always on it. So why wouldn't he want it? Right. He's like, what is this thing that you're on? Like, I want that. It
must be exciting.
Exactly. Like something must be cool about it. So whenever he like starts going after my phone, I'm like, okay, I need a phone break because like, obviously I've been on it too much or something. And so that's just like a good, like gentle reminder for me. But anyway, I really try not to be on my phone when he's awake, although like I am like feeding him and filming him and whatever. But I do my best most of the days. But it is hard. So I think trying to batch my work to get it done on the times when he's either napping or in the morning before he goes to sleep. I try to turn it off at night after dinner time because I just don't like being on my computer, and I like to spend that time with Thomas, husband. And yeah, so it's hard. I actually keep my phone on airplane mode every day from like 8 till, and it's not always perfect, but from like 8 to like 6 a.m. is my goal. Just to get that break from phones and and technology, and that is like self-care to me. The other biggest self-care to me these days is just a hot shower that's like more than 10 minutes.
It can be that simple. Yeah.
That's it. Like, that's it. Like, I don't have any fancy self-care things other than like sometimes like take yourself to coffee if you can, or bring your kid, because sometimes I just take tea with me and I'm like, this feels good. Or like we go out on walks, and like sometimes self-care looks like being with him doing things that are good, that make me feel good, or make me happy. So yeah, just kind of all of that, if that makes sense. I don't have any fancy frills or anything like that. Sometimes just like my cup of coffee in the morning in the quiet when nobody else is awake is like the best thing I could ever ask for.
Yeah, no, I think that's so great. And that is so encouraging, because I believe in simple self-care so strongly, because you need to find those pockets of self-care throughout your day, throughout your week. And I'm definitely a wake up early and get things done mama myself, because I am, aside from I have Fridays, which are my work day, but otherwise I work at home, and I'm working during naps and in the morning, just like you. And so, yeah, taking those moments, even if it doesn't feel fancy, I think is so important. And it's funny. So now that we have 2 kids, on the weekends, my husband and I will split up with the kids. And so he'll watch the youngest one or get some time to himself when she's napping. Aww. And I'll bring my big kid with me to the coffee shop, and we'll go, and she gets like tablet time. We'll sit and chat in the beginning. I don't just like put her on her tablet the whole time. Yeah. But we'll sit and we'll like share a baked good, and she'll have her tea and I'll have my coffee, and then she goes on her tablet and I read. And like we've been doing it almost every weekend, and it feels like it's such a fun time to connect with my daughter, but it also feels like self-care to me. So I love that you brought that up too. Sometimes self-care can be with your kiddo, going on a walk or going to a coffee shop. There's so many ways. It's just about filling your cup, I think, on a regular basis. Yes.
And not everybody has access to somebody helping them watch their kid. And I understand that. We actually have, both of our grandmas are in town, but they both have a lot of grandkids. So we've got 4 on both sides. So it's you know, we don't actually have somebody to watch him as often as we thought we would, which is totally fine. But you just realize that, but we are thankful to have family around just to begin with. But you do realize, like, there's so many people that don't even have access to a babysitter, or maybe can't afford it, and that's okay. So find the things that you can do at home. That maybe your kid's napping, go take a hot shower. Mm-hmm. Like, do something that feels good. Throw on a face mask while he's napping. I think the more I find that, like, I really set more boundaries with my phone or my computer or technology, then I find more time to do the things that make me feel good too.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
You can get lost in the technology.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so easy. And I love that you said that he wants your phone too, because I tend to hide my phone during the day from my kids because they want to be on it. Yeah. So awesome. Great. So I have what I call the final 3. So there are 3 fun, short little questions that I like to ask all of the guests that come on. And because I love food, and I know both you and I are foodies, and we enjoy food, and we've thankfully gotten to this place where we can enjoy food, what is your favorite thing to cook?
Okay, so I'm actually going to turn it to bake, because I'm such a baker. I love to bake. Actually, Thomas is the big cook. I enjoy cooking, but I love to bake because I like a recipe and I like to follow it. Throw in a couple other things. But anyway, I think one of my favorite things to bake right now is, oh gosh, it's such a hard thing. I mean, I did just make 3 banana breads in one day the other day. And so I do love banana bread, but I actually love baking cake, which is, I don't do it like ever, but I went through a phase. This was before T was born because I had more time. But I went through a phase where I was baking cakes all the time, and I had so much fun. And that's like something I actually really want to bring back a little more, which is funny because I actually never really thought I liked cake. And it turns out I really do like cake. I had convinced myself I didn't like cake, but now I love it. So anything that's like cupcakes or cake or like cookies or something, I just like love to bake. So I did not pick one thing. I picked them all.
I love it. Well, you gave a couple. You gave banana bread and cake.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so fun.
Yeah.
So then what is your favorite thing when you go out to order or have someone cook for you?
All right, cook for me. Pasta. I love when Thomas cooks me pasta. It's like I was never a pasta girl, and now I learned I love pasta. It's amazing, and it's delicious, and he makes the best because he's Italian, and I'm a little partial. And one of my favorite things to order out, I do love pizza. That's my other, that's like my favorite, probably takeout type of order, pizza or Indian food actually. But when I'm at a restaurant, I love meal items that are like a really yummy fish with beautiful seasonal produce. I love that kind of stuff, with a yummy grain or a pasta or something with a fish or a steak or something like that. I like to try everything.
I love it. I'm a huge fan of asking what the specials are, because usually the specials are what the chef is most inspired with, right? So, and usually the most seasonal stuff. So yeah, I love that. So the last question I have is, we talk a lot on this podcast about finding your beautiful balance, going beyond obsessing over food and finding nourishment and pleasure in food and in life. So what does your beautiful balance mean to you?
So I'm going to say my beautiful balance actually has nothing to do with food at all. I'm going to say that it has to do everything with everything else. I think I've found that the less I focus on food, and food just being the cherry on top of my day, and the more I focus on my community and my people and my friends and my kid and my life and, all the beautiful blessings God has given us in this world, and just the sunshine, and when I focus on the little things, the simple things in life, like the trees that are starting to bloom even though it's still winter, those things, that's what a beautiful balance looks like to me. When I can just really appreciate all the little simple things in life, which isn't always easy, but when you can just appreciate what you have and be grateful for what you have, that's when I feel the most balanced.
Oh my gosh, I'm tearing up over here. That was beautiful. I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for having this awesome conversation with me. I enjoyed it so much. And I love how many parallels we have in our story, too.
Yes.
So before I let you go, can you just share where my listeners can find you so they can get more of Lex?
Yes. So I am on Instagram as restoring_radiance. And then I have a website as well, which is just restoreyourradiance.com. And that's everything.
Got lots of delicious recipes in both places, actually. Yeah,
Thank
from
you.
you and your husband. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He is the cook of the family, but I cook too. So.
And you bake, right?
And I bake. I'm the baker.
Well, thank you again. This was so wonderful. I am so excited to share this with my listeners.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, you guys. Was that not the best interview? I had so much fun chatting with Lex. What started out as an interview really just turned into a really awesome chat. I love how much our stories intertwined, even with little things like our studying abroad and our experience with food and, overcoming eating disorders to finding real, true food freedom. And I love her story of not just learning how to eat intuitively, but eat normally and become a normal eater and be able to pass that on to her kiddo and her future kids. So I hope you loved this interview as much as I did. To find more of me, be sure to head to my website, healthymamachris.com. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook at healthymamachris. And do me a favor and go ahead and give me a star rating and a review if you loved this podcast, because every subscribe, every review, and every rating helps this podcast be seen and heard by more moms who need to hear this message. Thank you so much for listening, friends. Have a beautiful day.